Welcome, 8th graders, to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're literally traveling back in time to look at the regional economies of the United States before the year 1877. It's a hugely critical period in history, one that fundamentally shaped the nation we live in today. We're going to look closely at the what, the how, and the why of the Southern economy during this era. Specifically, we'll focus on the massive system that drove it, and, crucially, the devastating human cost behind it. So here's our roadmap for today. First up, wealth and deep injustice. Second, defining the plantation system. Third, the human cost of labor. Fourth, economics, power, and resistance. And finally, we'll wrap up with the need for morality. All right, Section 1, Wealth and Deep Injustice, looking at the dual nature of the pre-1877 regional economy. Now, before we get into the gears and mechanics of the economy, we really have to grasp the big idea of this era. And that is, massive wealth was built entirely on massive injustice. To set our moral compass here, let's look at Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed. You see, when we study really difficult history involving immense human suffering, we don't just do it to memorize a bunch of dates. We study it to learn how to seek justice and to understand exactly why defending the oppressed is so absolutely vital. Keep that in the back of your mind as we unpack how this system actually worked. Moving on to Section 2, defining the plantation system, the what. So, what exactly are we talking about when we say plantation system? Well, these weren't just your average, everyday family farms. Far from it. These were massive, massive agricultural operations with a very specific business model. Grow a single cash crop, and maximize profit at all costs. But the darkest, most defining feature here? The entire engine of the system was built completely on forced, enslaved human labor. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly were they growing? The main drivers of this system were highly specific, extremely labor-intensive cash crops. We're primarily talking about cotton, rice, and tobacco. And remember, these weren't crops grown just to feed the local town. No, they were grown to be sold globally. They fueled textile mills and international trade, which funneled just immense, staggering wealth right back to the plantation owners. I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. Why did these specific cash crops require such incredibly large numbers of workers? What was it about cotton or tobacco that made the demand for human labor so astronomically high? Well, the answer is simple, but it's brutal. Planting, tending, and harvesting these specific crops was incredibly labor-intensive. Think about it. There were no heavy machines back then, no automated harvesters doing the heavy lifting. Every single cotton boll, every single tobacco leaf had to be planted by hand, weeded by hand, under a blazing sun, and harvested by hand. It required an immense, constant, back-breaking amount of physical effort to run operations at the scale these huge farms demanded. That brings us to Section 3. The human cost of labor, the how. We really need to slow down right here, because we're shifting from the numbers of economics into the grave reality of human lives. This contrast perfectly illustrates the stark reality of the era. On one side, you've got enormous wealth and privilege for a tiny, tiny group of landowners. But on the other side, creating all that wealth were enslaved African Americans, people forced to work from sunrise to sunset, completely denied basic human rights, and legally treated not as human beings, but as property. This staggering inequality represents millions of stolen lives and stolen freedoms. And it is absolutely crucial to understand that this isn't just ancient history safely locked away in some dusty textbook. Not at all. The moral and economic consequences of slavery still affect the United States today. This labor system fueled massive political debates over human rights, over whether slavery should expand into new territories, and over the balance of power between states. The ripples of this profound injustice shaped the very foundation of the country, and, they're still felt in modern society. Let's move into Section 4, Economics, Power, and Resistance, the why. And what's really interesting about this is to understand why the system was so deeply entrenched, we literally have to follow the money and look at the financial motivations that locked it into place. Based on what we just discussed about massive wealth and the scale of these plantations, ask yourself, who actually held most of the political power in the South during this time? If you guessed the plantation owners, you hit the nail on the head. A very small percentage of incredibly wealthy landowners controlled not just the vast majority of the land, but practically all of the political power. Wealth directly equaled political control. Because they were the ones making the laws and holding the offices, they used that political power to fiercely protect and try to expand the exact system of slavery that was making them rich. The whole system was rigged to sustain itself. And this massive consolidation of power built a really dangerous cycle of economic dependence. It's like a trap. Step 1, plantation owners pulled in massive profits from their single cash crops. Step 2, instead of diversifying their businesses, they took those profits and reinvested everything right back into buying more land and more enslaved laborers. Which naturally leads us to step 3. They completely ignored new technology and industry. This tunnel vision made the entire Southern economy incredibly vulnerable to global market shifts. If the price of cotton fell, the whole system shook. So, looking at that cycle, how did the plantation system actually limit industrial growth? Why weren't factories and new technologies booming in the South the way they were in other parts of the world? Well, the answer really boils down to greed. The sheer profitability of slavery made many powerful Southerners completely unwilling to even consider industrialization, let alone emancipation. I mean, they were making so much money from the status quo, from exploiting forced labor, that they fiercely resisted any kind of change. They had zero incentive to build factories or innovate when the brutal system they already had was making them incredibly rich. It was a fatal economic flaw, completely driven by a profound moral failure. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the need for morality, connecting education and life choices. As we wrap up today, we really want to transition from the historical facts of this explainer into a vital life lesson. Education without morality will hurt. This is actually the core philosophy of our series. Think about those plantation owners for a second. Many of them were highly educated people. They knew global economics, agriculture, law, but because their education was entirely divorced from morality and justice, they built a system that caused unimaginable pain and suffering. You see, true learning isn't just about accumulating facts so you can hoard wealth or power. As this quote beautifully notes, Romans 8:6-7 promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps his or her mind spiritual. The true goal of your education should be to engage with spiritual understanding and moral truth. That's what brings peace of mind, and that's what equips you to actually do good in the world, rather than harm. Which leaves us with this final, really vital question to reflect on today. Just look back at the history we just explored. Look at the immense damage done by powerful, highly educated men who completely lacked a moral compass. So, what's the point of being smart and supposedly educated if you just continue to make bad choices that hurt others and yourself? I want to leave you with that thought. Let that question challenge you as you continue on your own educational journey. Thank you so much for joining me for today's explainer, and I'll see you next time.